Hello to all the classic people that are returning. I'm glad you're back. I want to welcome any new visitors. Today on Classic Movie Review, we are taking on the Western comedy Hearts of the West, 1975. I don't remember this movie from when it was released, although it was in my prime movie theater going years. I saw it on cable and decided to give it a look, especially because Jeff Bridges became such a good actor. I'm glad I did. I think you will also like it. I want to shout out to CWDK. Thanks for the comments on 7 Days in May 1964. Also to Thunderstruck54 for commenting on using the famous Wilhelm scream for Johnny going to the gas chamber. I try to put it in every time a bad guy dies. On IMDb.com, this film has a 6.5 rating. This film is much better than that score. Rotten Tomatoes has the film at 88% on the tomato meter and 43% audience approval. I am shocked and horrified by these scores. These scores make as much sense as a Montana weasel ranch. The great film critic Roger Ebert gave this film 3 stars up in a January 1st, 1975 review. Ebert said of the film, quote, "Hearts of the West is a lovely little comedy, a movie to feel fond of. It's about a farm kid who sends away for a correspondence school course on how to be a cowboy and runs away to a godforsaken crossroad in Nevada because he wants to hang around the campus. The kid, all earnest and engaging, is played by Jeff Bridges, that open-faced young actor from The Last Picture Show 1971 and Fat City 1972. He brings a nice complexity to the role. He's Lewis Tater. Did I say Taylor? No, Tater. Fresh off the farm and totally naive, but he's got plunk, and he's determined to survive in the Hollywood jungle. This movie's no great shakes, I suppose, but I liked it. There are a few big laughs in the movie, but not too many, and most of the time, what we're feeling is affection. These are likable people, Lewis and his girlfriend, and even the so-called friend who tries to plagiarize the novel. And when the con men find themselves involved in a shootout, one of them apologizes, saying, "I never ever thought things would go quite this far," unquote. New York Times film critic Vincent Canby said in an October 4th, 1975 review that there is a glamorous side to Hollywood of the 1930s, and, quote, "the other side is the scroungy, tacky world of B pictures, westerns, war movies, raucous musicals, shot on a shoestring on back lots and in the nearby hills, by fly-by-night operators who make the major studio filmmakers look like Cellinis. This is the eccentric world recalled with such affection and good humor by Hearts of the West. This benign comedy, directed by Howard Ziff, there is not a truly nasty person in this movie, though it has its share of operators and con artists, each of whom fails with varying degrees of intrepiditude. The film tells the remarkable adventures of an Iowa farm boy named Lewis Tater, Jeff Bridges, whose father is called Pa Tater and who dreams of becoming a writer of Western novels like Zane Grey. To this end, Lewis goes west to pick up local color and winds up, instead, reluctantly being groomed as a Western star of B Pictures, directed with a stunning hysterical lack of talent by Mr. Kessler, Alan Arkin. In Lewis, it has a hero who must be 2 things at once: a comic dunderhead, a sort of Mertone of the movies, to give the film comic drive, as well as a straight man to give it poignancy. It doesn't always work. Instead, the film is carried by the consistent intelligence of its observations and the sweetness with which it tolerates ineffectual rogues, rascals, and fanatics of a very parochial kind. The film is also consistently well played by Mr. Arkin and Mr. Bridges, and the large supporting cast, including Blythe Danner, Andy Griffith, Donald Pleasant, and Richard B. Schull and Anthony James, who recalls Twain's Duke and Dauphine as operators of a phony correspondence school for writers. I like this film. It's funny and uplifting. I recommend all but the worst cynics watch this one, unquote. Actors.
Right, and I'm a Shakespearean actor.
Jeff Bridges is pretty amazing in the role of naive Iowa farmer and aspiring writer Lewis Tater. His future film greatness can be seen in this film. Bridges was first covered in Against All Odds in 1984, the remake of film noir Out of the Past 1947. Anthony James was cast as the unnamed Lean Crook. He's pretty good at being a villain. James was recently covered in The Heat of the Night in 1967. The next group of relatively well-known actors were only in this movie for a minute or two. This ties in with something I will talk about in the conclusions. Anne Seymour, from All the King's Men, 1949, had a bit part as a maid. Donald Pleasant, from The Hallelujah Trail, 1965, played a publisher. Dub Taylor, from The Undefeated, 1969, played a grouchy, naturally, Nevada ticket agent. Frank Caddy, from When Worlds Collide, 1951, played Paw Tater. Herb Edelman, from The Yakuza, 1974, played Polo, a frustrated director. Woody Palfrey, from Planet of the Apes, 1968, played a producer. And the great film noir actress Marie Windsor, from The Narrow Margin, 1952, played a small part as Woman in Nevada. Most of these roles were uncredited as well. Andy Griffith played cowboy stuntman Howard Pike. Griffith was born in the small town of Mount Airy, North Carolina in 1926. I understand the town is now a tourist spot designed to look like Mayberry. Griffith's mother was a homemaker and his father was a carpenter. Introduced to the guitar by his mother, Griffith graduated from Mount Airy High School in 1944, where he acted and performed music. He attended the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, earning a degree in music. Before he was successful, Griffith worked in New York clubs as a comedian and singer. Griffith was performing in the play Destry Rides Again when Danny Thomas and former film noir tough guy Sheldon Leonard approached him to play Sheriff Andy Taylor on The Andy Griffith Show, which ran from 1960 to 1968, which was proposed as a spinoff from The Danny Thomas Show, which ran from 1953 to 64. In Griffith's first film, A Face in the Crowd, 1957, this homespun and good-natured played one of the meanest and hated film characters ever, Lonesome Rhodes. After appearing in the stage performance, Griffith went on to star in the film No Time for Sergeants, 1958. He occasionally returned to the sinister roles, and it was always shocking to see Sheriff Andy do something bad. He was a bad guy in a couple of TV movies, Pray for the Wildcats, 1974, which had William Shatner in it, and Coweta County, 1983. He was also in Rustler's Rhapsody, 1985, a 1940s version of a movie similar to today's film. Also, Griffith was in the spoof film Spy Hard, 1996, with Leslie Nielsen. Griffith had another successful television series with Matlock, 1986 to 1995, where he played a cheapskate lawyer in a small town. Following this show, Griffith retired to Manio, North Carolina. He died in 2012. He was 86 years old. Manio is a presumed site of the lost colony of Roanoke, where all the colonists vanished, leaving only a sign saying Croatan. Full disclosure, I've had a crush on Danner since The Great Santini, 1979, as the perfect Southern lady. Danner was born in Philadelphia in 1943. Must be a good actress too. Danner grew up in Philadelphia. She graduated from high school in 1960. She studied acting at Bard College. After graduation, she began working for the theater companies in Boston. She did quite well, being awarded a Theater World Award for the work at the Lincoln Center and a Tony for Butterflies Are Free. Danner began working on television in 1968 and was in a few television movies. Her first film was To Kill a Clown, 1972. That same year, Danner was in the musical 1776, which came out in 1972. It was about the writing of the Constitution. She played Martha Jefferson, wife of Thomas Jefferson, who was played by Ken Howard. You may remember Howard from the White Shadow 1978 to 81, where he was a basketball coach. Danner had a successful film career, highlighted by Hearts of the West 1975, Future World 1976, which was a sequel to Westworld 1973, The Great Santini 1979, The Prince of Tides 1991, Meet the Parents 2000, Meet the Falkers 2004, The Last Kiss 2006, and the hilarious alien movie Paul 2011. Fred Ward had a small uncredited role as Sam. So why am I including his bio here? Well, I'm getting ready to review The Right Stuff 1983, which has about 20 actors, so I'm trying to spread them out a bit. Ward was born in California in 1942. He served 3 years in the U.S. Air Force before moving to Europe, where he worked dubbing movies. He had a couple of small parts in some Rossellini films. His first significant film role was in Escape from Alcatraz 1979, co-starring with Clint Eastwood. He kept playing the role of a tough guy in films like the Cajun-inspired Southern Comfort 1981, Uncommon Valor 1983, and as the foul-mouthed astronaut Virgil I. Gus Grissom in The Right Stuff 1983. Ward was given a role designed to create a breakout in Remo Williams' The Adventure Begins 1985. This campy movie hurt his career more than it helped. Someone, thank goodness, recognized his comedic talents, and he found a place in films like Tremors 1990, The Player 1992, Bob Roberts 1992, Naked Gun 33 and a Third, Naked Gun 33 and a Third, The Final Insult 1994, Joe Dirt 2001, and Corky Romano 2001. Story.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
The credits roll over the sound of a film crew preparing to film a screen test. The test is shown in black and white. The director says, Lewis Tater, Jeff Bridges' test. Take 1. Tater doesn't come into the screen because the director didn't say action. When he does enter, he is dressed like a gunslinging cowboy. He follows the direction and is shot from all angles. As he smiles, the title of the movie is shown. When more credits roll, Tater is behind a typewriter, creating the world of the Outlaw West on the page. Tater acts out Western scenes as he thinks about his writing. It is the middle of the Great Depression, and Tater lives with his family on an Iowa farm. At supper, Paul Tater, Frank Caddy, reads a letter to the family from the dean at the correspondence school, the University of Titan in Nevada. Tater's brothers laugh at their brother wanting to be a Western writer in the vein of Zane Grey. The letter requests a $25 payment. The letter continues about the beauty of the school's location. Tater doesn't want to take it by correspondence. He plans to go to the West and study at the school while learning about the West. Tater is later dropped off at the isolated train station in Titan, Nevada. Tater goes inside to talk with the station manager, Dub Taylor. Tater doesn't think he's gone far enough west because he doesn't see anything he considers Western. Tater asks about the buffalo head on the wall, and the station manager says, there ain't no buffaloes around here. The head was just something left in the shipping room by a furniture mover.
I want to know where I am.
Titan, N-E-V, short for Nevada. Over there, California.
I just wanted to make sure. I thought, since there wasn't any horses or anything really Western, that maybe I hadn't come far enough. However, I did notice your buffalo head you got up there. Still see many of them around, do you?
I ain't never seen one in my life. There ain't been a buffalo around here since the turn.
Tater asks about the university, and the station master tells him he can see it from where he is standing. The university is postal boxes 17 through 24. The station master says there is no university and that once a week, 2 guys come to pick up the mail. Against advice, Tater sits down to wait. A woman, Marie Windsor, enters the station and checks both the bathroom before asking Tater who got off the train. Tater gives a detailed description of the couple that also got off the train. He says in his line of work, writing, he notices details. The woman gives him a ride to town in her battered pickup truck. She takes him to the Rose Hotel where she works. A man is sleeping in the lobby, but it doesn't stop Tater from rambling on about being a writer. He acts out scenes that he envisions in his mind. The hotel people are not interested. The woman gets a call from 2 men in one of the rooms. The 2 men are the correspondence school scammers. They are known as Stout Crook, Richard B. Schul, and Lean Crook, Anthony James. The woman goes to their room and tells the 2 crooks that the new guest is a farm boy that came out because of their advertisement. The Stout Crook says they pay the woman to check for postal inspectors and not help those that they have ripped off. Tater is still acting out a script when Stout Crook goes down to check him out. The woman introduces Tater as a writer. Stout Crook now knows that Tater is not an undercover postal inspector. Lean Crook proposes robbing Tater, but Stout Crook says that would be a stupid idea. Later, when the woman takes Tater to his room, he tries to hit on her despite their considerable age difference.
Where are you staying?
None of your business.
I was hoping we could get to know one another.
Lie down and cool off.
Later that night, When Tater is asleep, Lean Crook enters the room and begins robbing Tater. Tater wakes and begins fighting. He eventually wins the fight by hitting Lean Crook with a lamp. Tater grabs his belongings and runs out of the hotel to where Stout Crook is preparing to get into his car. Tater steals the car, leaving Lean and Stout Crook behind. He flees down the road, having no idea where he is going. It is not too long before the stolen car runs out of gas on a desert dirt road. Tater checks the car's boot, trunk, for gas, but only finds a metal box. The top of the metal box has a revolver and ammunition. Tater sees the lights from a car containing the two crooks coming down the road. He takes his bag and the metal box and runs into the desert. When the two crooks arrive, Stout Crook says Tater won't survive in the desert, so they will return in the morning to find the body. Tater walks through the desert carrying his suitcase and the metal box. He has a shirt tied on his head. This shot was ripped off plainly by National Lampoon's Vacation 1983. The two crooks arrive at their stolen car on mules. Tater acts out scripts in his head as he walks through the desert.
There was no one quite like the kid for quickness and everything else. He was a wonder. He led a dream life, a life of no ease.
Suddenly he hears gunfire. A group of mask-wearing cowboys come riding by, shooting their pistols as they ride. They are at Vasquez Rocks. More about that later. Tater falls down as the men ride past. The head of the group, Howard Pike, Andy Griffith, gives Tater a ride to where a film crew is shooting a movie. The group of cowboy actors include Lester, Burton Gilliam, of Blazing Saddles 1974 fame, and Jackson, Matt Clark, who acted in Jeremiah Johnson 1972 and The Outlaw Josie Wales 1976. The group tells Tater they are making a movie. Pike calls Mrs. Trout, Blythe Danner, over to help the still confused Tater. Earl, Alex Rocco, comes and puts the actors back to work. Trout comes over with a cigarette hanging out of her mouth. She is the assistant to the director Kessler. Tater tells his tale in Western slang and says he's a writer. Later, Kessler, Alan Arkin, directs a scene where Lyle, Wayne Storm, the big star, and another stunt cowboy fight. The signs on their vehicles say Tumbleweed Production Company. Tater sits to the side and takes everything in. When the shoot is finished, Pike invites Tater to ride to Los Angeles with the crew. Sometime later, the two crooks arrive on their mules. The only clue they have of what has taken place is a boxed lunch from the Rio Cafe in Hollywood. On the ride back to town, the actors rib each other about their look. Tater asks what the job pays. Pike says you are paid based on the work you do. They say the top actors and all the money is up front in a nice car. Jackson says to ask Pike what it's like. Pike replies that he's heard it's pretty grand. Tater gets out at Pike's apartment, but none of the actors will take him in. They point him in the direction of a boarding house. In the morning, Tater wakes in a bed. He grabs his wallet to see if he's been robbed. He has not. He is staying at Stern's Hacienda La Cienega. Tater keeps working on his typewriter trying to find a sellable story. Sometime later, Tater goes to the Tumbleweed Production Company and asks Trout about a job. She says that Kessler writes the scenarios and all of the writers are out of work because of the depression. Trout gives him an application, but no hope of a job. Pike steps over and asks Tater if he can fight and deal with crabby cowfolk.
Kid, are you handy with your mitts?
Sure.
Think you can deal with tough, ornery cowpokes day in and day out?
I know I can.
Pike sends him to the Rio Cafe for a busboy/dishwasher job. One of the waitresses, Candace Azira, thinks Tater is cute. Several days later, Tater gets a call to be an extra on a Western film. Earl tells the stuntmen in what order they are to be shot. Kessler, the director, says to keep it simple. Pike tries to explain the rules of the stunt work. Tater is caught in his own world of Western writing. Tater asks Pike about Trout. Trout says it is hard to tell about a woman who wears slacks, and she may have deviant sexual taste.
What do you think of Trouty, Howard? I mean, in terms of general attractiveness.
Walk around in slacks the way she does. Woman like that's hard to tell. Could be her sexual interests are deviant.
The filming begins and Tater jumps into hero mode and runs out of the rocks towards the Western Star. He does an epic death scene. Kessler attacks Tater and Earl has to save him. At night, around the fire, Tater is too gung-ho. The crew camps out at the filming site. Tater sits in his tent and continues to type his story until he is threatened with a beating.
I know one tenderfoot's gonna get his pecker shot off if he don't turn in.
The two crooks drive to Los Angeles to search the Rio Cafe for Tater and their missing metal box. On the second day of filming, Kessler offers $7.50 for a stunt jumping on a horse. None of the veteran stuntmen will do the stunt. Tater jumps forward and says he will do the stunt. No extra money. They dress Tater as the Western star, and Kessler takes him upstairs where he will jump through a window, onto the roof, and down onto the back of a waiting horse. Tater does the stunt pretty well, but he is racked by jumping onto the horse without wearing a cup.
He didn't wear a cup.
Bitch. Didn't anybody tell him?
I think they pushed some rope around my chest. Oh.
He ain't even getting paid for it. That's the awful part.
Pike explains that you must wait out the director until the price is high enough to make it worthwhile. Crew goes back to the city. Pike gingerly sits on a stool in the Rio Cafe, talking to the waitress. He goes on about his injuries, including his private ones. He is looking down and the waitress leaves. An old man at the counter, Bill Quinn, thinks Tater is talking to him. The two crooks arrive at the Rio Cafe. Tater comes face to face with the crooks. He escapes out the back of the restaurant with the two in pursuit. Tater gets away and makes it back to his room. He opens the metal case and finds the gun, stationery from the University of Titan, and a couple of $1,000 in cash and money order. The stout crook tells the waitress that lean crook is Tater's father. She says she has never seen him before. During the encounter, the waitress gets a phone call order from a studio. Lean Crook steals the list of studio addresses. Tater goes back to the studio where Kessler is firing an actor for wanting a raise. The producer, Mr. Gates, Woodrow Parfrey, Kessler, and Earl are in the office. Kessler says they can easily replace the fired actor. Kessler goes outside and looks the stunt actors over. He brings Tater into the office. Even though Tater has never acted, Kessler gives him $55, and then he says $60 a week to start. Trout helps Tater with his lines, but Earl rushes him onto the rehearsal. On his first try, Tater is terrible at acting. Kessler gives him some tips and pumps him up. Suddenly, Tater can act, but he is the film's heavy and takes a punch to the gut from the Western star. Gates, Trout, and Kessler watch the film. Gates recommends giving Tater a screen test. Kessler tells Tater that his acting was average. The dejected Tater walks away, and Trout goes after him. She makes an excuse for him to come to her house. The stout crook starts calling the studios, looking for Tater. Trout and Tater unpack a hula girl lamp and radio at her house and have drinks. She recommends that Tater show his story to Pike. Kessler has been paying Pike extra for Western dialogue. Trout thinks it is cute that Tater would rather be a writer than an actor. The couple has a dance, and he tries to get into her bedroom, and a Murphy bed falls from the wall. They end up on the bed as the rain falls outside. Still in the rain, Tater rushes to Pike's apartment. Tater has a massive boulder in his living room that fell on him while filming at Vasquez Rocks. Tater says he is a writer. Pike replies that he is a writer when others say he is a writer. Pike takes the Hearts of the West manuscript to read. The crooks are still searching the studios for Tater. With his new job, they put a picture of Tater in his Western garb on the wall of the Rio Cafe. All the stuntmen are sitting in the booth talking about films. Lester says Tater looks like Billy Pueblo. Pike agrees. Tater says he has read Pueblo's book, but has never seen any of the actor's films. Pike says Pueblo was very frugal and invested all of his money in a Montana weasel ranch. He says the price of weasel pelts jumped 3 years later. Now Pueblo walks around his mansion wearing silk pajamas.
Pueblo. Now, he wrote great westerns. I read Trail of Gold 8 times. Never did see any of the movies he acted in, though.
Frugal man. Never spent a dime he didn't have to. Put everything into a Montana weasel ranch. Weasel pelts took a jump 3 years later. Now he walks around the big house in silk pajamas.
Pike continues that it is a great success story and goes on to talk about independent wealth. The subject of Tater's pay comes up, and Pike tells him to take nothing less than $150 a week. He also says when Kessler squawks, Tater should head towards the door. The next day, Tater meets with Kessler about his salary as a heavy in the film. Kessler offers $110, and Tater refuses. Kessler already has a life-size cutout of Tater as a Western actor. Kessler explains how much money he has spent on Tater already and how much experience he will gain. Kessler calls Tater small potatoes. Kessler comes up to 130. Tater walks out of the room and is not stopped by Kessler. Kessler then fires him. Later, Tater sneaks onto a World War I movie set dressed as a doughboy. He gets Trout's attention. Tater explains that he got fired, and Trout says that the star of the picture doesn't get $150 a week. She also tells him to look at the picture of Billy Pueblo next time he is in the Rio Cafe and see if it reminds him of Pike. Trout continues that Pike is Billy Pueblo and he wasted all his money. Trout tells him she may be able to get him in to see pulp novel publisher A.J. Knight's Donald Pleasant. Tater is sent to the set of a musical being directed by Polo, Herb Edelman, whom Trout used to work for. Polo is also Neats' brother-in-law. The assistant to Polo is played by Frank Bonner. Polo refuses to introduce Tater to his brother-in-law. Polo is complaining about a film project he is trying to get off the ground. He needs $2,000. Tater says he will get the money in exchange for a meeting. Tater returns to his room and begins typing a letter on the University of Titan letterhead so he can open a bank account. Trout comes to visit, holding his Western cutout, but he shoos her out of the room. At the bank, Tater uses wit to get past the bank manager, Thayer David, and teller, William Christopher. Christopher is better known as Father Mulcahy on MASH. Tater takes the check to Polo. He is told that Neats will hold the money until the picture is done, because Neats is the actual film backer. Tater takes a taxi to a large mansion. The housekeeper, Ann Seymour, takes Tater to meet Knights. Knights has a rack of odd hats and tells Tater to take one. Knights knows Tater is a Western writer when he picks the cowboy hat. Knights takes the money and agrees to read the novel. The crooks are still going studio to studio looking for Tater. Tater gets a message from his landlady that he needs to meet Knights for brunch. The party is very eclectic and catered. Knights is wearing pajamas. He takes Tater to the beach and says he has 2 manuscripts submitted by 2 different sources and they're both exactly the same. He then tells Tater that the manuscripts are titled Hearts of the West.
I have 2 copies of this remarkable manuscript from separate sources. Peculiar, huh? A pain in the ass.
Oh, what's it called?
Hearts of the West.
Knights takes Tater to meet the author. Tater is shocked that the plagiarist is Pike. He is heartbroken by the betrayal. Tater throws the manuscript and leaves the brunch. The 2 crooks finally make it to Tumbleweed Productions. They use the same story that Tater is a missing son. The crooks are provided with Tater's address. When Tater returns to his apartment, the crooks have already ransacked his room and are waiting in a car for his return. At another location, Kessler forces his way into Trout's apartment. Tater shows up with his suitcase in hand. When Kessler comes out of the kitchen, Tater thinks he's been betrayed again and storms out. Trout takes a taxi to Tater's apartment. The crooks see her turn on the lights in Tater's room. A stag party is taking place in the back room of the Rio Cafe. The waitress is doing a burlesque dance in Western outfit-ish. Trout busts into the all-male event looking for Tater. She goes to Pike and asks for Tater. Pike is uncaring. Pike is called to tell a raunchy story for the stag party. Finally, one of the stuntmen tells Trout that Tater is at his place. Trout leaves, but the crooks are following her. Pike has an attack of conscience and leaves the stag party. Tater is soaking in a tub as Trout tries to explain that she is not in a relationship with Kessler. The 2 crooks break in and begin searching the apartment. Tater tries to talk his way out of the trouble. The nude Tater stands up to the crooks. Lean Crook pulls a gun and shoots Tater in the arm. When Stout Crook tries to take the gun away, Tater is shot again. Pike breaks in with his 6 guns firing. He locks the crooks in the closet before he tells them that he is shooting blanks. Tater forgives Pike and says that he looked just like Billy Pueblo charging through the door. Trout calls for help. The crooks are arrested and hauled away. Tater is loaded onto a stretcher and taken to an ambulance. From the stretcher, Tater tells Pike that this would make a great story. Pike replies that it would be independent wealth money. Trout goes with Tater. Stout Crook asks Pike who the kid is. Pike replies, he's a writer. He just sold his first novel.
Who is that kid? Lewis Tater. He's a writer. Just sold his first novel.
Tater writes the story in his head as the ambulance drives away. Conclusion.
Oh, that's not right. No.
When I watched this film for the show, I noticed that it's written like a screenplay for a movie. This occurred to me when I was watching Marie Windsor in the role of Woman in Nevada. It is the type of title given to a bit character in a screenplay before an actor is selected. For example, neither of the crooks had a name, just being called Stout Crook and Lean Crook. Of course, this set my wheels spinning. I began to wonder if the entire adventure was taking place in the mind of Tater while he was still back in Iowa. Anyway, just a thought. Today's movie can be grouped into a set of movies about Hollywood's golden age. These movies were made when the original stars of silent film were reaching the end of their lives. It is natural for nostalgia to occur as the generation that did something passes. For example, most Civil War battlefields weren't commemorated until the surviving soldiers began to die from old age. According to IMDb.com, these tribute films include Inserts 1975, Valentino 1977, Nickelodeon 1976, Silent Movie 1976, The Wild Party 1975, The Last Tycoon 1976, Hearts of the West 1975, The Day of the Locust 1975, and The World's Greatest Lover 1977. Dave Karger of TCM said that Hearts of the West 1975 is very similar to The Purple Rose of Cairo 1985. Much of the movie making that took place in this movie was filmed at Vasquez Rock. Like so many of us, I first found out about this filming location by watching the Star Trek 1966 to 1969 episode where Kirk fights the Gorn. I talked about this briefly in Werewolf of London 1935. However, movie filming at this location goes back at least to Dracula 1931. At least 66 movies have been shot here, numerous television shows, and even music videos. Lastly, the boarding house where Tater stayed in Los Angeles was called Stern's Hacienda La Cienega. This can be translated as Stern's Swamp Estate or Stern's Dirty Water Estate. World famous short summary: keep writing, don't ever give up. This show is now completely free and independent, brought to you without external ads. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave a review where you get your podcast or where you watch YouTube. It really helps the show get found. As a technical note, references and citations are listed for each show on the site at classicmovierev.com. Beware the Moors.